Χρήματα δεν υπήρχαν και έτσι έβαλε ένα μεγάλο χρηματικό ποσό ο Ιωάννης στους αποδείχτες. Το 1829 λοιπόν ξεκίνησε να χτίζει τον ναός αυτός. Έβαλε θεμέλιο ο Καποδίστριας ανήμερα της αποδομής της κεφαλής προδρόμου, 29 Αυγούστου 1829.
Παναγία Τριάς ελέησον ημάς, Κύριε ελάησον αμαρτίες ημών, δέστος συγχώρησον της ανομίας ημίν. Άγιοι επίσκεψη Κυρίας ασθενείας ημών και το όνομα του, Κύριε ελέησον, Κύριε ελέησον, Κύριε ελέησον, δόξα Πατρί και Υιό και Αγίο Πνεύματι, και νυ και αεί και σε αιώνας των αιώνων. Αμήν. Πάτερ ημών εν της ουρανής, αγιαστείου το όνομά σου, εκ τη βασιλεία σου και το θέλημά σου, ως εν ουρανό και επί της γης των άρτων ημών των επίων της οδός ημίν σήμερα και άφησε μην τα πλήματα ημών, ως και εμείς αφήνουμε τους αφήνετες ημών και εμείς εν έχεις εμάς πειρασμόν, αλλά ρίσε ημάς από του πονηρού.
Ότι σου έστειν η βασιλεία και η δύναμη και η δόξα του Πατρός και του Υιού και του Αγίου Πνεύματος.
Τα ελληνικά μου δεν είναι τόσο καλά, αυτά, να σας εξηγήσω ποιοι είναι αυτοί που είναι εδώ πέρα. Αυτοί είναι δύο Αμερικανοί που ήρθαν μόλις ήταν η Επανάσταση. Ο πρώτος ήταν ο George Jarvis που ήρθε το 1822. Ο άλλος ήταν ο James Williams, ένας σκλάβος από την Αμερική, μαύρος, που έφυγε από το Baltimore στην Αμερική και ήρθε και αυτός πάλι, πάλεψε για την πατρίδα μας και πέθανε εδώ και τον θάψαν εδώ στο Άγιο Γιάννη στον Άργο. Η Επανάσταση, την Ελληνική Επανάσταση δεν είναι μόνο για τους Έλληνες, αλλά ήταν σε αυτή την εποχή για όλο τον κόσμο, in particular για τους Αμερικανούς. Και αυτό είναι κάτι που είναι πολύ μεγάλο. Η Επανάσταση που βοηθήσανε άλλοι και οι Έλληνες που παλέψανε και βγάλαν να πούμε σκλαβιά που είχαν εδώ στην Ελλάδα. Πολλοί από αυτούς που παλέψαν εδώ πήγανε πίσω στην Αμερική και πάλι κάνανε το ίδιο να σώσουν τους μαύρους που ήταν και αυτοί σκλάβοι. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ στο Άργος, πάρα πολύ στο Άγιο Ιωάννη και όλη την επιτροπή εδώ πέρα στο Argolis και God bless America και ζήτω η Ελλάς.
Με πολύ συγκίνηση καλωσορίζουμε σήμερα στο Άργος τον σπουδαίο Έλληνα του εξωτερικού, τον Ηλία τον Κάτσο. Τον ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ για την παρουσία του εδώ και την προσπάθεια που κάνει διαχρονικά για την ανάδειξη του ελληνισμού, για την προώθηση του ελληνισμού στην Αμερική και σε όλο τον κόσμο. Πραγματικά εδώ είναι θαμμένοι δύο Αμερικανοί Philhellenes της Επανάστασης του 1821, οι οποίοι πήραν μέρος στην Επανάσταση του 1821 και αυτό δείχνει και τη σπουδαιότητα της Επανάστασης, την παγκόσμια φύση της και την απήχηση που είχε αφού συγκινήθηκαν άνθρωποι από τα πέρατα του κόσμου, από τόσο μακριά όπως ήταν η Αμερική τότε και ήρθαν εδώ να υπηρετήσουν αυτόν τον σπουδαίο σκοπό, αυτά τα ιδανικά της ελευθερίας και της δημοκρατίας. Νομίζω ότι αυτή η προσπάθεια του κ. Κάτσου θα έχει συνέχεια, θα έχει μεγάλη συνέχεια για τον τόπο μας. Τον ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ και από την πλευρά μας ο Δήμαρχος ο Δημήτρης ο Καμπόσος και η Δημοτική Αρχή θα πορευτούμε μαζί για να μπορέσουμε να αναδείξουμε αυτό το γεγονός των Philhellenών και του φιλελληνισμού και κυρίως των Αμερικανών Philhellenών που είναι χαμένοι εδώ, γιατί νομίζω ότι μετά από 200 χρόνια τουλάχιστον αξίζει να μπορέσουμε να τιμήσουμε αυτούς τους ανθρώπους και όλο το γεγονός και τη σπουδαιότητά του.
Να ξέρετε κάτι άλλο, ότι ο κύριος Hill που είναι εδώ πέρα, η οικογένεια του ήρθε στην Αμερική το 1645. Είναι Αμερικανός 100%, γι' αυτό είναι μαζί μας σήμερα, γιατί πιστεύει ότι δεν πρέπει να ξεχάσουμε αυτούς που έχουν φύγει και έχουν πεθάνει σε ξένα κράτη. Και το καλύτερο θέμα γι' αυτό είναι ότι πεθάνανε για την ελευθερία της Ελλάδος.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for EMBCA's Revolution of 1821, American Philhellenes Holy Ground in Ayios Ioannis in Argos, Greece panel discussion. This event is in association with AHEPA's National Hellenic Cultural Commission and the American Hellenic Project at Queens College. My name is Lou Katsos, EMBCA's president and AHEPA National Hellenic Cultural Commission chairman. And I will introduce today's discussion and co-moderate it with author-poet Professor Nikolaos Alexiou of Sociology and the director of the Hellenic American Project at Queens College, and also an EMBCA director. The distinguished panel today will include Hellenic Supreme Court lawyer Sotiris Kotsovos, president of Danaos Culture and Philological Society in Argos, speaking on behalf of himself and Argos Mayor Dimitris Kamposos, Technologist and EMBCA director Eric Hill, Father Antonis Philippis of Ayios Ioannis, Timios Prodromos Church in Argos, who will be speaking on behalf of himself, as well as His Eminence, the Metropolitan of the Argolis, His Eminence Nectarios. Also, we have with us today Archaeology PhD candidate Dimitrios Kousoulas. We have Nikolaos Boumparis, president of the Argolis Association of Philologists, and Argos Biologist, Educator Maria Stathoyianni. Last year, in late July 2021, and in the video that you saw, I represented EMBCA and its president, and also represented the Greater Harlem Chamber of Commerce in New York, which is one of the largest chambers of commerce in the United States, as well as AHEPA's Hellenic Cultural Commission, with EMBCA directors Konstantin Drougos and Eric Hill, who also represented the Florida Plato Academy Charter Schools. And we made what was called a pilgrimage to Hellenic Revolution of 1821 holy burial ground in Argos. Eric is with us today as one of the panelists. The trip to Ayios Ioannis, Timios Prodromos Church in Argos, Greece, was to commemorate and speak about Americans George Jarvis and James Williams and other Philhellenes who fought in the Hellenic Revolution and are buried in the Ayios Ioannis grounds. It is one of the most important and celebrated events relating to the 200th anniversary of the Hellenic Revolution of 1821 in Greece last year. One of the major Philhellenic figures of the Hellenic Revolution, George Jarvis, was the first American to join Greece's fight for freedom. His exploits and correspondence to Americans during that period helped fuel the flames of America's support of the revolution, known historically as the Greek Fire period in American history. With famous American abolitionists, Samuel Gridley Howe, known as the Lafayette of the Greek Revolution, who was also the chief surgeon in the revolution, and Jonathan Miller, a famous guerrilla fighter, becoming a Hellenic colonel in the revolution. He helped with distributing food and clothing supplies to the war-weary Hellenes, and they saved thousands. Going native, Jarvis, wearing the fustanella, fought in many well-known battles throughout Hellas. He was an adjunct to General Yorgos Karaiskakis and was there when Karaiskakis, also known during that period as Karaiskos, fell in the battles for Athens. Known as Kapitan Zervos or Zarvas, he reached the rank of lieutenant general in the war. His journals were among the most valuable on the ground in terms of documents relating to the Hellenic Revolution and the War of Independence. James Williams, also one of those who we believe is buried on the grounds, was an African-American slave from Baltimore who fought in the Barbary Wars as a U.S. Navy Marine under Educator, and later under Lord Cochrane's Hellenic Navy fleet, fought at Nafpaktos and other areas. When visiting last year, we discovered that it was not known where the American Philhellenes were buried in the church's courtyard, nor others for that matter, and we decided to help do something about it. This panel discussion, among other things, will go into what has transpired since the commemoration, expand on what is known on who is buried in Ayios Ioannis, and discuss EMBCA's plan to conduct a ground-penetrating survey of the church's grounds using the Hellenic company Metrisi Techniki Eteria, after approval from Greece's archaeological agency. And we hope to find the locations of all those who are buried there. Argos in the Peloponnese, Greece, is one of the oldest continually inhabited cities in the world, and certainly the oldest continually inhabited one in Europe. This event and others we have had are part of an extension of EMBCA's American Hellenic Revolution of 1821 Bicentennial Committee series of events that we started 2 years ago, which focused not only on the revolution, but also importantly on the American diaspora and the international aspects and influences of the revolution. I would just like to say a few words with regards to Argos and its continuous journey of 3,000 years from mythology to history. The most ancient residents of Argos were indigenous Pelasgians. The first settlers were Phoenician traders, followed by Egyptians, led by Inachos around 2000 BC. Under the reign of Inachos, the city prospered considerably, and the residents named Argos and the rest of the Peloponnese the land of Inachos. The river next to the city's walls were created and named Inachon. Inachos was succeeded by his son Philologists, and don't mind my mispronunciations, who created the city of Argos, the city of Philologists, which is considered to be the first city in the world. According to tradition, he was the first to discover the fire that burned constantly in the temple of Lycian Apollo, and also called Philhellenes' fire. Niobe, the daughter of Philhellenes, gave birth to Argos, who reigned in the city and gave it its name. Argos, of course, participated in the Trojan War under the leadership of Diomedes, that many of us, of course, have read in the famous Homeric tales. The Dorian descent towards the end of the 12th century BC exhausts the Mycenaean state, and Argos became the center of Hellenism. That was when the great state was founded. Temenos of the Iraklion line occupies Argos and replaced Mycenae as the royal seat of the Temenid family, becoming the metropolis of Dorian Argolis. Argos is traditionally considered, again, to be the origin of the ancient Macedonian royal Greek house dynasty. The most celebrated members were Philip II of Macedon and Alexander the Great. As a strategic location on the fertile valley of Argolis, of the Argolid, Argos was the major stronghold during the Mycenaean era. In 146 BC, the Peloponnese became a Roman province, and during the Roman province era, Argos became and had a period of prosperity. At the time of Hadrian, significant public works were undertaken. The theater is converted in order to support the spectacles of the age, and there was obviously many temples that were built during that period, and one of the largest and best preserved Roman baths complexes in Greece was actually built around the area. Christianity was brought to Argos in the 5th century by the apostle Andrew, and I am an archon of the Order of Saint Andrew of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. For those who know, numerous Hellenic temples and exist there, and obviously many Christian churches were erected during that period. The city of Argos raised the flag of the revolution on the 23rd of March, 1821, led by Stamatelos Antonopoulos. Since then, Argos was the heart of the revolution, during which it suffered many disasters. Preparations for the first assembly at the time were also done there, and they took place in the grounds that we're talking about in the Church of St. John, while the Fourth National Assembly was held in the ancient theater in 1829. A fighter who has been linked to Argos was Makrogiannis, mainly because he stayed in the city for a long period of time, where he began writing his memoirs. Again, many generals were involved there. Many generals built their mansions in the city. With that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, who will speak for himself, but also give the greetings of the mayor, who has unfortunately had a sore throat recently. And it's my honor to introduce Sotiris Kotsovos. Sotiris is a lawyer in the Supreme Court and is a member of the Nafplion Bar Association since 1978, and who deals with civil, commercial, and banking cases. He was a counselor for 12 years and vice mayor of the municipality of Argos from 1990 until 1998, with the responsibility of culture, the legal entities of the municipality, public relations, European Union programs, and the general social issues of the municipality. And he participated in many national and international conferences. From 2000 to 2006, he was elected president of Culture and Sports Organization of the Prefecture of the Argolida, and successfully organized major local, national, and international events. In 2006, he was elected the prefecture councillor, and in the year 2008, he was appointed the vice deputy prefect of the Argolida area. In 2010, he was elected as the head of the municipal combination, councillor of the municipality of Argos Messini until 2014. Since 2000, he was a member of the board of the Historical Association of Citizens of Argos, or Danaos, and since 2017, he was the chairman of the board. Welcome, Sotiri, and thank you for joining us in today's panel discussion.
Καλησπέρα από την Ελλάδα. Καλησπέρα από το Άργος. Θα σας μεταφέρω το χαιρετισμό του Δήμαρχου, που από πληροφορίες μου σημερινές δεν είναι εύκολο να μιλήσει, διότι έχει πρόβλημα υγείας και δεν μπορεί να έχει μία αφωνία. Με την συνάντηση που είχαμε μαζί την ημέρα της γιορτής του Ευαγγελισμού, μου είχε μεταφέρει ότι θα έκανε μια μικρή αναφορά στην ιστορία του Άργους, αλλά και θα σας μετέφερε το ενδιαφέρον του και τον ενθουσιασμό του για αυτή την προσπάθεια που κάνετε για την ανάδειξη της προσφοράς των Αμερικανών Philhellenών, και θα έκανε ό,τι ήταν δυνατόν να περάσει από το χέρι του να προωθηθεί αυτή η προσπάθειά σας. Σας μεταφέρω λοιπόν αυτή την πρόθεσή του, δεδομένου ότι ο ίδιος δεν μπορεί να σας μιλήσει. Είναι σίγουρο ότι όλοι εμείς εδώ στο Άργος αυτές τις συνεργασίες με τους ανθρώπους, τους ομογενείς, τις αποζητούμε και είμαστε αρρωγοί και συμπαραστάτες της, και θέλω να σας διαβεβαιώσω ότι σε οποιαδήποτε προσπάθεια κάνετε, είτε ερχόμενοι στο Άργος, είτε από την Αμερική, ο Δήμος του Άργους, έχω τη διαβεβαίωση από τον Δήμαρχο ότι θα είναι αρρωγός και συμπαραστάτης σας σε οτιδήποτε θελήσετε και στο μέτρο του δυνατού του Δήμου να σας το προσφέρει. Εγώ έχω την εξής δυνατότητα. Μπορώ να σας διαβάσω την εισήγησή μου στα ελληνικά, καταθέτοντάς τις δίπλα στο chat στα αγγλικά, για πιο σύντομα δηλαδή, και θα σας καταχωρήσω ταυτόχρονα και μερικές φωτογραφίες που τις παραπέμπει το κείμενο που θα σας διαβάσω. Νομίζω θα είναι πιο εύκολο και για σας να βλέπετε το αγγλικό κείμενο, και για μένα να συντομεύσω λίγο αυτά που έχω να σας πω, γιατί αγγλικά σίγουρα θα τα πούμε λίγο πιο αργά. Έχετε κάποιο πρόβλημα σε αυτό?
Όχι, δεν είναι πρόβλημα καθόλου.
Ωραία. Καταρχήν να σας πω πάλι μια καλησπέρα. Χαίρομαι ιδιαίτερα που είμαι σε αυτό το πάνελ με εξαιρετικούς συναδέλφους και με θέλω να ευχαριστήσω όλους σας και ιδίως τον κύριο Κάτσο που είχε την ευγενή καλοσύνη να με καλέσει ανάμεσά σας στη σημερινή διαδικτυακή μας συνάντηση. Δεν ξέρω αν ακούγομαι καλά.
Πολύ καλά.
Πολύ ωραία. Το περιεχόμενο της συνάντησης αυτής, αγαπητοί φίλοι, είναι ιδιαίτερα σημαντικό, δεδομένου ότι γίνεται για ένα πολύ μεγάλο γεγονός, αυτό της ταφής των Αμερικανών Φιλελλήνων σε έναν ιδιαίτερα ιστορικό τόπο της πόλης μας, τον Άγιο Ιωάννη, αλλά και μέσα στις εκδηλώσεις της επετείου της Επανάστασης του 1821. Σαν πρόεδρος του Ιστορικού Συλλόγου του Άργους ο Δαναός, θα σας αναφέρω με τη μεγαλύτερη δυνατή συντομία λίγα λόγια για το σύλλογό μας, την βιβλιοθήκη του, το ιστορικό του αρχείο των αγωνιστών του 21 και τη σχέση του όμως και με την ομογένεια της Αμερικής, δίνοντάς σας μερικά ντοκουμέντα που δεν ξέρω αν εσείς θα τα έχετε στους συλλόγους της Αμερικής που ζείτε και εργάζεστε. Θα σας πω λοιπόν την ιστορία του Δαναού, η οποία χάνεται στα βάθη του προηγούμενου αιώνα. Στις 2 του Δεκέμβρη του 1894 εγκρίθηκε με ένα βασιλικό διάταγμα το καταστατικό του συλλόγου ο Δαναός μετά από συγκέντρωση στις 16 Δεκάτου του 1984 μιας ομάδας 100 περίπου ατόμων από όλους τους χώρους της κοινωνίας του Άργους για ένα πνευματικό ξεκίνημα και μια πνευματική πορεία μέσα στον χρόνο. Έτσι, με επικεφαλή στο σχολάρχη Χρήστο Παπαϊκονόμου, έναν καθηγητή θεολογίας, μετά την πρώτη γενική συνέλευση που έγινε στις 22 Ιανουαρίου του 1895, στο Καποδιστριακό Πρώτο Σχολείο του Άργους, ξεκίνησαν για την πραγματοποίηση των σκοπών της πνευματικής ανάπτυξης της πόλης. Ο μυθικός βασιλιάς του Άργους, Δαναός, επελέγει σαν επωνυμία του, γιατί και αυτός από την εποχή του εκείνη ταυτίστηκε με την ιδέα της προόδου και της ηθικής. Ταυτόχρονα, ο σύλλογος τέθηκε υπό την προστασία του Αγίου Πέτρου, πολιούχου και προστάτου της πόλης μας, και καθιερώθηκε να εορτάζει την ημέρα της γιορτής του Αγίου, δηλαδή την 3η Μαΐου, κάθε χρόνο. Οπότε και εμείς στο σύλλογό μας πραγματοποιούμε λαμπρή τελετή στο ιδιόκτητο μέγαρό μας στο Άργος, υποδεχόμενοι τις αρχές και την κοινωνία της πόλης. Ο σύλλογος στην αρχή της ίδρυσής του στεγαζόταν πρόσκαιρα σε γραφεία μελών του ή σε δημόσια κτίρια και χώρους, ώσπου μετά από μία δωρεά οικοπαίδου στο κέντρο της πόλης, στις 9 Έκτου του 1896 κατατέθηκε ο θεμέλιος λίθος του Μεγάρου σε σχέδια Ιφικράτη Κροκίδη και μετά από συνεχείς δωρεές αργίων επιχειρηματιών αλλά και αργίων διαμενόντων στην Αλοδαπή, το κτίριο στη σημερινή του μορφή τελείωσε το 1900. Πλέον ο σύλλογός μας διανύει το 128ο έτος της ιστορίας του, με έδρα το Άργος, και περιλαμβάνεται μεταξύ των παλαιότερων φιλολογικών συλλόγων της Ελλάδας, έχοντες εκατοντάδες μέλη, ιδιόκτητο νεοκλασικό κτίριο, με αίθουσες διαλέξεων, τεράστια και σημαντική βιβλιοθήκη με πάνω από 8.000 τόμους βιβλίων, από δωρεές επιφανών λογίων της εποχής, πρωτότυπο αρχείο αγωνιστών του 21 και λειτουργεί όλα αυτά τα χρόνια μέχρι και σήμερα με τη συνεχή παρουσία και φροντίδα αργίων επιστημόνων και λοιπόν φιλοπρόοδων πολιτών. Το πνευματικό έργο του Δαναού μέσα στο μεγάλο αυτό διάστημα αναπτύχθηκε με διαλέξεις, συνέδρια, ημερίδες, νυχτερινή σχολή απόρων και εργαζόμενων νέων και παιδιών που λειτουργήσε από το 1900 μέχρι το 1973 με πάνω από 2.500 αποφοιτήσαντες νέους εργαζόμενους της εποχής, μια σχολή βυζαντινής μουσικής κλπ. Στο διάβα της πορείας του και ανάλογα με τις οικονομικοπολιτικές συνθήκες κάποιων περιόδων, λειτουργήσαν στο κτίριό του η Γενική Εφορία Πολέμου το 1917, τμήμα πεζικού της 4ης Μεραχείας και αναρωτήριο από το 1918 μέχρι το 1920, προσωρινό νοσοκομείο το 1940, νοσοκομείο πολιτικής επιστρατεύσεως το 1941. Έτσι, η πολύχρονη, αιωνόβια θα έλεγα, φωτεινή παρουσία του στην πόλη και στην περιοχή έχει κάνει τον Δαναό μας παράδειγμα και πηγή πολιτισμού, ζωντάνιας και συνεχούς έρευνας. Από το βήμα του ΔΕ έχουν μιλήσει η διαπερπέστερη και έστερη των ειδικών πάσης φύσεως από την Ελλάδα και το εξωτερικό. Έχουμε εκδώσει με την ίδρυσή του ομώνυμη εφημερίδα από την δεκαετία του 1800 και στη συνέχεια έχουμε προβεί σε σωρία εκδόσεων με ιστορικό περιεχόμενο κατά περιόδους, δημιουργώντας μάλιστα προετών και ελεύθερο ανοιχτό πανεπιστήμιο Δαναός με τη συνεργασία και τον συντονισμό πολλών καθηγητών πανεπιστημίου, το οποίο λειτουργήσε σε καθημερινή βάση με συμμετοχή πάνω από 100 συμπολιτών μας. Τελευταία, στο πλαίσιο των κλασικών δραστηριοτήτων του Δαναού, εμπλουτίσαμε με εκδηλώσεις μουσικής δωματίου, οργανώνοντας συνέδρια και εφημερίδες και ημερίδες αφιερωμένες σε επιμέρους θέματα αργιακού και αργολικού ενδιαφέροντος, με ντόπιους ομιλητές, ιστορικούς και αναλυτές και εκδώσαμε με αντίστοιχα περιοδικές εκδόσεις, αλλά και τόμους πρακτικών διαφόρων τομέων σε ιστορικά μνημεία, μουσεία και χώρους στην Ελλάδα και στο εξωτερικό, αλλά και κυρίως διαφυλάσσοντας την πολιτιστική μας κληρονομιά και ιστορία στο ιδιαίτερα σημαντικό αρχείο και τη βιβλιοθήκη μας. Μεταξύ των ιστορικών σημαντικών ευρημάτων που ο σύλλογός μας κατέχει και συντηρεί στις αρχαιοθήκες του, ιδιαίτερα περίοπτη θέση κατέχει το αρχείο Τσόκρη και το ιστορικό αρχείο Άργος, τα οποία δωρήθηκαν στο σύλλογό μας από τους κληρονόμους του στρατηγού Δημητρίου Τσόκρη, που έχει ταφεί επίσης στο περίοδο του Αγίου Ιωάννη, τα οποία περιλαμβάνουν περίπου 600 πρωτότυπα έγγραφα και τα οποία απαρτίζουν έναν τόμο που εκδόθηκε με ιδιαίτερη υπερηφάνεια από το σύλλογό μας το 1994 σε ιδιαίτερη τελετή με τον τίτλο «Αργολικών ιστορικών». Το αρχείο αυτό έχει διαιρεθεί σε 3 επιμέρους ενότητες. Η πρώτη αποτελεί το προσωπικό αρχείο του στρατηγού Τσόκρη, η δεύτερη είναι ένα τμήμα από το προσωπικό αρχείο του στρατηγού Νικηταρά, του Τουρκοφάγου, και η τρίτη με άλλα δημόσια έγγραφα της εποχής που συμπληρώνονται και με άλλα ιδιωτικά και μεταεπανεστατικά έγγραφα του ίδιου διαστήματος. Στα αρχεία του Τσόκρη και του Νικηταρά, τα οποία είναι πρωτότυπες επιστολές, αναδύονται οι μορφές των αγωνιστών αυτών. Η καταξίωσή τους από το πολιτικό και στρατιωτικό σύστημα του αγώνα, αναφέρονται σωρία επιστολών με τους σημαντικότερους αγωνιστές και πολιτικούς της εποχής, όπως οι Κολοτρονέοι, ο Πλαπούτας, ο Κουτουριώτης, ο Λόντος, ο Ζαΐμις και άλλοι, όπου ο κάθε μελετητής βρίσκει ανάμεσα στην τραχύτητα της εποχής και τόνους συναισθηματικούς, αλλά και πατριωτικούς, με υψηλό αναστατικό φρόνημα και διάθεση. Ο τόμος αυτός που περιέχει σωρία πρωτότυπων επιστολών και των αγωνιστών σε κέρια ζητήματα και τα οποία επιφυλασσόμαστε στην δική σας αρμοδιότητα να σας τον προσφέρουμε οποτεδήποτε συναντηθούμε, αποτελεί όσημο προσφοράς του συλλόγου μας στην ιστορική έρευνα της Επανάστασης του 1821, για το οποίο όλοι εμείς εδώ στο Σύλλογο είμαστε υπερήφανοι. Όμως ο Σύλλογός μας, και αυτό είναι και ιδιαίτερα σημαντικό στη σημερινή μου παρέμβαση, ήταν και είναι ακόμη σε συνεχή επαφή με τους ξενιτεμένους αργίους και γενικά αργολιδείς, ιδίως στις ΗΠΑ, οι οποίοι και στάθηκαν εκεί και συμπαραστάτε τους σε πολλές περιπτώσεις από την ίδρυσή του. Αμέσως με την ίδρυση του Δαναού το 1894, ο επιφανής συμπολίτης μας και ήταν και δωρητής στην πόλη του σχετικού μας νοσοκομείου, ο Δημοσθένης Δεσμήνης, απέστειλε επιστολή προς την τότε ελληνόφωνη εφημερίδα Νέας Θερμοπύλε, που δημοσιεύτηκε στο υπαριθμόν 12 φύλλο της 16 Ιουλίου 1900, το οποίο έγινε το όλο ιστορικό της ίδρυσης του συλλόγου μας, καλούσε τους εγκατεστημένους στην Αμερική αργίους να συνδράμουν με κάθε τρόπο και ιδίως οικονομικά στην ενδυνάμωση του νέου τότε συλλόγου, αλλά και της ομώνυμης εφημερίδας μας. Έτσι, ο Σύλλογος 1901, ο Σύλλογος μας έλαβε, όπως προβλέπω μέσα από το αρχείο μας, μέσω της εφημερίδας Θερμοπύλε 80 δραχμές από συνδρομές αργίων της Νέας Υόρκης και της Ατλάντα. Το 1902, και ενώ άρχισαν να λειτουργούν οι σχολές απόρων παιδών στο μέγαρό του, ο εξαμερικής αργίος Γιώργος Καραλής εδώρισε 500 δραχμές για τις σχολές και αποπεράτωση του κτηρίου μας. Το Ιανουάριο του 1903, οπότε αγιογραφήθηκε η εικόνα του μπροστά του Αγίου Πέτρου πάνω από το βήμα του κεντρικής αίθουσας εκδηλώσεων, Απεστάλησαν και άλλες 112 δραχμές από τους Αργίους της Νέας Υόρκης. Με σχετικές τους μάλιστα θερμές επιστολές, οι συμπατριώτες μας στην Ατλάντα, Μιχαήλ Κόλλιας, στις 24 Τετάρτου του 1903 και ο Πιτ Μπράουν στις 29 Έκτου του 1904, ενίσχυσαν με τις συνδρομές τους την εφημερίδα του Δαναού. Στη συνέχεια, ήταν πολλές οι φορές που είτε ερχόμενοι στην Ελλάδα, είτε με εμβάσματα, πολλοί συμπατριώτες ενίσχυσαν το σύλλογό μας, που ήδη ήταν ιδιαίτερα σεβαστός και αγαπητός στην ομογένεια. Ακόμα και ο δικός μου Τζίμι Κοτσοβός, που έζησε στην Ατλάντα πάνω από 50 χρόνια και γύρισε οριστικά το 1958, μου μιλούσε με σεβασμό για τον Δαναό και ότι τον ήξεραν όλοι εκεί. Οι αγαπητοί μας φίλοι και συμπατριώτες Κώστας Κακουριώτης, Κώστα Κάκου και Κώστα Γιάννος, που ζούσαν για δεκαετίες στην Ατλάντα, ερχόμενοι εδώ κάθε χρόνο και επισκέπτονταν τακτικά το σύλλογο ακόμη και την ημέρα της γιορτής του Αγίου Πέτρου και μας διηγούνταν για το εκεί ομώνυμο σύλλογο Δαναό, φέρνοντας την αγάπη των εκεί μελών. Την τελευταία φορά, μάλιστα, ο Κώστας Κάκου, που ήρθε γύρω στο 16-17, μας έφερε και ένα πόστερ με τα ονόματα και τις φωτογραφίες όλων των προέδρων του Δαναού της Ατλάντα, αφιερωμένες στο σύλλογό μας, με τις οποίες έχουμε και αναρτήσει σε περίοπτη θέση του συλλόγου μας με πολύ αγάπη. Δεν ήταν βέβαια και λίγοι άλλοι συμπατριώτες μας εγκατεστημένοι στην Αμερική, που συνέδραμα το Δαναό με μικρά ή μεγάλα ποσότητα. Τέλος, να αναφέρω το φίλο του συλλόγου μας Αθανάσιο Λιβαδίτη, που διαμένει στο Σικάγο, ο οποίος κάθε χρόνο στη γιορτή του συλλόγου μας του Αγίου Πέτρου, οπότε πανηγυρίζουμε, μας ενισχύει με ένα ιδιαίτερα σημαντικό ποσό για τις βραβεύσεις των μαθητών που έχουμε καθιερώσει. Αγαπητοί φίλοι, η ανώβια σχέση του συλλόγου μας με τους ξενιτεμένους συμπατριώτες και όλη την Αγγλία και την Ελλάδα γενικότερα, ο σύλλογος μας επιθυμεί να συνεχίσει και να αναζητεί τρόπους επικοινωνίας και επαφής μαζί τους. Η σημερινή εκδήλωσή σας ας είναι η επαρχή μιας νέας πατριωτικής σχέσης των συμπατριωτών με τον ιστορικό μας σύλλογο. Η υπότιτλη του συλλόγου μας είναι πάντα ανοιχτή για συνεργασίες, επαφές, για πληροφορίες από το αρχείο μας και κάθε μορφή δική σας αίτησης ή ζητάτο, όπως και η επιθυμία σας συνεχίζεται για οποιαδήποτε ενίσχυση στο σύλλογό μας. Επίσης θα συνεχίζεται να είναι διαρκής, ιδίως μέσα στο βιώνουμε όλοι. Δεδομένου ότι ο σύλλογός μας, σας λέω και αυτό, δεν έχει πάγια έσοδα, δεν είναι ιδιωτικός σύλλογος, δεν είναι κρατικός σύλλογος, εκτός από τις συνδρομές των μελών. Σας ευχαριστούμε για την πρόσκληση και σας αναμένω οπουδήποτε, ιδιαίτερα κύριε Κάτσο, εσάς και τους συνεργάτες σας, που τόσο ώστε να σας φιλοξενήσουμε και να σας συνδράμουμε σε αυτό το δύσκολο έργο που έχετε αναλάβει. Χρόνια πολλά για την επέτειο και ζήτω 25 Μαρτίου του 1821.
Thank you, Sotiris, for that wonderful history of the Danaos society, both in Argos and in the United States. It was wonderful to hear what you had to say, in particular about some of the patriots that existed, obviously, within the U.S. who have helped Argos throughout its history. I'd like now to introduce my co-moderator. Many of you know him, obviously, because we have done a lot of events together. He is on the board of directors of EMBCA. And Professor Nikos Alexiou and I, over the years, have done many events around what we're talking about today. Not only George Jarvis, but also about James Williams. It's something we started a few years ago. And the interest that we had is to demonstrate how the Hellenic Revolution actually affected the American abolitionist movement and helped in freeing the slaves of the United States of America. Professor Alexiou was born in Volos in Greece, where he studied economics. He has received an MA degree in sociology as well as a PhD. He has taught in the Department of Sociology at Queens College since 1990, and he has received the President's Award for Excellence in Teaching. His fields of interest are social and political sociology, ethnic studies, and research. He has established the first archive library museum for the Greeks of New York, and he is the director of research of the Hellenic American Project at Queens College. Also, he is a contemporary poet. He is the author of 6 books of poetry, and many of his poems have been published in Greek and American journals and anthologies. He is a member of the Greek Authors Association in Hellas and the Greek American Writers Guild Association in New York. Welcome, Nico, and always good to see you.
Thank you, Lou, for the introductions and having the opportunity for this event. Θέλω να καλωσορίσω και τους πολύ εξαιρετικούς Έλληνες συμπατριώτες, επιστήμονες. Ακούγοντας λίγα πράγματα για το Δαναό, είναι τρομακτική και η προσφορά αλλά και η σχέση με την Αμερική. All these years, Danaos and their interactions with America is very, very impressive. And also very pleased because, as you said before, we tried that since the beginning of 2019. And I'm very thankful to the people of Argos for their collaboration and support and agapi, because those things are products of agapi and nothing else. Probably I need to want me to introduce Eric at this moment, Lou.
No, why don't you make a small presentation? I think you were going to make a presentation on James Williams.
Yeah,
and then you can go to Eric. Yeah, you can go to Eric.
Things. Είπες ορισμένα πράγματα. Κωνσταντίνε, για προχώρησε να δούμε. The case of Philhellenes can be generally divided in three categories. First of all, it was a movement within the states in the form of speeches, fundraising, and medical supplies, food, clothing, as well as being expressed in the arts. A second angle, or a second form that it took, it was a movement in Greece per se, by the representatives of the American Philhellenic committees, such as the philanthropists, doctors, missionaries. And finally, one important aspect or category was the direct participation in the War of Independence, as in the case of Americans who fought in Greece for liberty and independence. Among them, he said Dimitris and James Williams, who was a slave who managed to free himself from Baltimore and join the US Navy as a cook. And as you mentioned, he was under the command of Admiral Stephen Decatur. William sailed to the Mediterranean Sea in the Second Barbary War around 1815 between the states and the North African Barbary Coast states of Tripoli, Tunis, and the Ottoman Algeria. During the piracy era. So he's one of the 15 well-documented Philhellene fighters. Also, we don't know very much about historically documented about his presence in Greece, but we can have a very strong case or hypothesis regarding his presence from various narratives or descriptions other people give for him. So we know definitely that he died in 1827. Some of the narratives argue that he took part in the liberation of Athens in 1822. Another narrative, another eyewitness narrative is that he was also in the Foreign Legion in the Battle of Peta. And of course, we know that the Philhellene battalion suffered massive casualties there. And after that, he managed to be in Mesologi. From Javris journals, we see some descriptions that he was there. Later, we have a case making an assumption here, my hypothesis, that Williams fought during the siege of Mesologi. With the fleet of Admiral Andreas Miaoulis, the island of Hydra, fighting several naval battles. In the Battle of Navarino, he fought on the Greek ship Carteria. And finally, you can see a passage from the actual notebook Jonathan Miller's journal. Είναι από το κείμενο του Miller when he has an entry in December 21st, 1927. Took James Williams, a black man from Baltimore, to my house. Having been some time in the hospital, Williams came to Greece with Lord Cochrane. I was cook in the Soviet, died himself with great coolness. And look further down when he says that for when no Greek could be found to take the helm, Williams volunteered his services and was there struck down by a splinter which broke his leg and arm. So you see how heroic. Ήταν ένας πραγματικός ήρωας. Πολέμησε πάρα πολύ ηρωικά ο James Williams και αυτό έκανε μεγάλη εντύπωση όχι μόνο στους Αμερικανούς αλλά και στους Έλληνες. Και αυτό είναι όπως το καταγράφει ο Μίλλερ στις δικές του σημειώσεις. Κλείνοντας, this is a painting that exists in Greece. The artist managed to paint this based on various descriptions from other people. And finally, we can see back in 2019 when HAP and my colleague, Mr. Tassos met with the people there and had an early discussion about this story. And until then, the case of James Williams wasn't very well known. And since the collaboration of HAP and EMBCA between Katsos and Kemena, we managed to make it more well known, I believe. And 2-3 years later, I'm very happy to be at this point ready to start finding something in the better ground. Είμαι πάρα πολύ χαρούμενος που η προσπάθειά μας που ξεκίνησε από το 19 σιγά σιγά να παίρνει σάρκα και οστά με τους ειδικούς επιστήμονες και με την θερμή και πολύ σημαντική υποστήριξη τόσο των ανθρώπων που έχουν την ηγεσία εκεί αλλά και γενικότερα των ανθρώπων των πολιτών του Άργους που είναι τόσο πολύ φιλόξενοι και τόσο πολύ θέλουν να αναδείξουν το τι κάνανε και πού βρίσκονται οι Αμερικανοί Philhellenes. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. Would you like to introduce Eric Hill?
Of course, but a problem with Eric is that he has a very long, biographical. So Eric will try somehow to say some of the things you do. That Eric Hill is a technologist in the third decade of his exceptional career. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in computer engineering from the University of New Hampshire. And in the early 1990s, he was involved with the rapid expansion of network infrastructure and distributed management systems that culminated in the dot-com boom. Later, he explored and researched data, warehousing, and analytics to bolster the understanding of complex system analysis. In the last decade, Eric became immersed in advanced automation efforts of a critical infrastructure, as well as in various areas of cyber and cybersecurity, interfacing with a number of tech industry organizations such as Gartner and Forrester, and has extensive experience in the defense sector. His significant and acknowledged volunteer efforts have been youth-centered over those years, and with also a laser focus on STEM pipeline development, mentorship, and empowerment. Since 2014, he has served as the volunteer director of the Diaspora Hellenic Compatibles program that has served the youth of Hellenic communities from Florida across the United States to Canada. Since 2016, he has served as the advisor to the Sons of Pericles in Florida. And in addition, he has had a long-term interest in the Hellenic charter school concept as a vehicle for youth development in America. Eric is a board member of EMBCA. Eric, welcome and thank you for being among this distinguished panel today.
No, thank you very much, Nico. I'd actually like to thank you and Lou for your research and follow-up activities, because a lot of folks do writing and talk, but actually action means more than anything. So thank you both. For me, I was born in New England, for those that are wondering. So I actually do have ties that do go back, that Lou mentioned it on site, but also in relation to Miller and Howe, where they were born. I was born in New Hampshire, which is in between Vermont and New England. And I have deep ties in some of the things that Howe was involved with, particularly and close. But regardless, what I would like to do, Costa, can you throw up the PowerPoint? Ironically, last year today, we announced I was going to do an on-site at Plato Academy. Plato Academy represents 9 Hellenic charter schools in Florida. They do learn Greek and children of all ethnic backgrounds. But this slide deck is not what, I'm not going to show the whole thing. What I really wanted to do was give some folks an understanding of the geography. So Nico, if you could go down to the first map slide. Now the title of this was The Greek Revolution of 1821 is Your History because it was American history, and understand that this was streamed to all 9 schools. Next slide. So the first Barbary War and the second Barbary War, Stephen Decatur, I'm not going to get into this too much, but Stephen Decatur was the warrior of the age for Americans. He was known for doing things that no one else would do. So you're going to see why Miller gave him credit as fighting under Decatur, and I assure you, Williams was not just a cook. I actually went into the US Navy records and some of the fighting on the Great Lakes between the US and the British and Canada. And one way you wanted to get out of slavery, you joined the Navy because people were dying. So there were numerous records in the bravery of African Americans in the Navy. So I'm assuring you, a cook doesn't simply take the wheel of the helm in the middle of the Battle of Lepanto. So again, next slide. Go down, next slide. We're gonna show some geography. Yeah, this is, okay, right here, just to show you, whether you're from New England, Baltimore in general, that arrow shows you where these men, more in particular, Williams, when he went off to the Barbary Wars, set off. Now that date's not accurate. This was more pertaining to Howe and Miller, but he set off much earlier. But again, if you look at the northern coast of Africa, he was off for a long ride. Next slide. So again, this is Greece. What I want folks to understand here, especially the youth I was talking to, Argos, again, next slide. So it's right there. Go head up. So right around Napa, you have Argos is, I thought it was on there. What I wanted to show up near Patras is where the Gulf of Lepanto is, where the note for Miller in being a hero. So again, the Gulf of Lepanto is the northern body of water just above to the east of Patras. So Argos again is actually it's covered by the marker, I believe. But Argos again is where we were. So if you can scroll down. And you can go all the way to the end at this point. I just more or less wanted to show that this was presented on site. There was much declaration I read from Miller's entries. Then we did tie in the USS Constitution. Go ahead. Again, this is just a recap. Go all the way to the end of the slides. Okay. Outcomes, Miller's and the Howes. Keep going. I want to reread an entry here again. There you go. So this is my daughter and I presenting here, and I go back one slide. We presented in traditional clothing, but I kind of suspected we were going to end up in Argos. So I actually had a slide, 1828, Brigadier General George Jarvis dies and buried at Argos. And James Williams dies in Greece. This was brought again to the 9 charter schools live with Lou doing the intro. Scroll down. Oh, sorry, next slide. Okay, this was the entry that Nico just read. I do want to read it really quickly again, just to understand the context, because this is a man from Virginia. I'm sorry, not Virginia, Vermont. I apologize. And he's out back here, and now they're distributing supplies. He meets Williams out on the island. When he finds him, I did find another document. I believe Howe treated him. I believe it might have been on Portos. I couldn't find the document as I was subsequent with these slides, but you'll notice he actually calls him a hero. And those aren't words these men use lightly. And given these times, it tells you the spirit of why they were there. He doesn't look at him as anything else but an equal, but in fact, a man of renown, really, Miller, saying in writing, a hero. Next slide. And Nico did justice to that entry. So I want to go to the next one. This is actually extracted from the same work, J.P. Miller. This is page 231. It's on Google Books. Just want to read this real quick to give you understanding of Jarvis. Now, Jarvis came down from Germany, went down to the port of Marseille, I believe, and then he took waters to Greece. He actually met Lord Byron, and he ended up, took up with Byron, ended up working with him again when he was eventually going up to Lieutenant General in the Hellenic Army. So this is what Miller had to say as they were distributing supplies. This is only a footnote. So I extract this from a footnote and kind of put it together. George Jarvis is a son of Benjamin Jarvis of New York, who held a situation under the United States government at The Hague. His son George was born in Germany and received his education there. Possessed of an uncommonly strong constitution and great energy of character, he engaged in the Greek struggle in 1821. Since which time he has pushed himself forward as a guerrilla soldier to the rank of brigadier general. He has numerous friends among the Greeks, but few among the Philhellenes. Swing to his entering fully into all the prejudices of the Greeks. He has probably seen more fighting and undergone more hardships than any foreigner who has taken part in this contest, having been frequently sick and wounded. The manner in which he was wounded in the plain of Tripolitsa is worthy of remark. He received a musket ball in his thigh. He fell, and his soldiers all fled. A party of Dalhais dashed upon him in order to cut, next slide, cut him in pieces. So when they say in pieces, they're talking about with swords and knives, close combat. Jarvis had the presence of mind to cock his musket. He had one musket ball. So he's surrounded, and remained in a position to send one of them to his proper place in case he should pounce upon him. Only one. So one of those guys was going to perish. So he kept them at bay. The Dalhais rode round him several times. The Greeks at length made a second attack, and the Dalhais were obliged to retire, and Jarvis succeeded in getting into the Greek camp. So in other words, there was a retrieval mission. The Greeks came and saved him, and he was keeping them at bay. So these are men that were fully engaged in the fight. In my view, both heroes. I just wanted to review this very quickly. Geography and both of them as equal men as heroes, and I believe reflects upon America, quite frankly, in every manner. I'll hand it back to Nico.
Thank you, Eric. One of the things that, by the way, no one ever mentions was that Jarvis actually came in there early, as we said, the first American to go there. But many people don't realize that he was also captured in battle right at the beginning. And not only was he captured himself in Navarino in one of the first battles in the revolution, but also one of the Mavro Michalei were also captured. And in the beginning, they were exchanged for Turkish troops. And that's how he continued, quite frankly, the fight. Thank you both. I'd like now to introduce Father Antonis Philippis. Father Reverend Antonis Philippis was born and raised in Athens and studied theology at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. While participating in Erasmus student exchange program, he studied in the Department of Orthodox Theology at the University of Munich in Germany. He is also an officiated, licensed tutor of Byzantine music. From 2017 onward, he serves as the head priest of the historical Church of St. John the Forerunner, Prodromos. He is currently developing his thesis, Contemporary Reflections on Mystagogical Catechesis, and part of his master's degree. Father Antonios is a member of the youth office of the Holy Metropolis of Argolida as well as responsible for the metropolitan youth. He also leads the summer camp for junior high school and senior high school school boys at the Metropolis. And he is also here on behalf of His Eminence, Metropolitan Nectarios of the Argolida. Welcome, Father Antonis.
Hello, Mr. Katsos. Nice to meet you from here. Firstly, I convey the greetings from His Eminence, our Metropolitan of Argolida Nectarios. You know very well he would like to take part in this panel today, but unfortunately, pressing commitments do not allow him to do so. So, as far as I am concerned as the head of the Church of Ayios Ioannis, I'm very glad to participate in this discussion, and I'm thankful for this initiative to bring more evidence to the light, referring to the American Philhellenes who are considered to be buried in the grounds of our church. So let me please provide you with some certain information about our historical Church of Ayios Ioannis in Argos. The Church of St. John of Ayios Ioannis is located to the west of the city of Argos. In its place, there was a small chapel dated to the first Byzantine years. According to folk tradition, this church was honored in the name of Saint Paraskevi. In this church, he officiated as a diacon of the Archbishop Iakovos of Argos, Father Germanos, the later Archbishop Paleon Patron Germanos, during the 3-year period 1793 to 1797. The works of the First National Assembly began in the church on December 1st, 1821, under the chairmanship of Dimitrios Ypsilantis. His secretary, Neophytos Vambas, delivered the opening speech, and the plenipotentiaries swore allegiance to the homeland. For safety reasons, the works of the National Assembly continued in Nea Epidavros, where on January 1st, 1822, a resolution was issued of the political existence and independence of the Greek nation. In 1822, Argos was destroyed by the Turks that invaded the city. Although the literary sources do not provide any information on the chapel of Saint Paraskevi for this period, it is possible that it was also destroyed by the Turks. In 1829, the construction works of the new church began. On the 19th of August, on the anniversary of the beheading of Times Prodromos, the first governor of Greece, Ioannis Kapodistrias, with shaky hands and lots of tears, deposits the foundation stone of the church and decided to support financially the works in order to complete its construction. At the end of 1832, the tasks were completed, and since 1865, it functioned as a metropolitan church of Bishop of Argos. Since 1865 and then on, because of the construction of the new church of St. Peter of Argos, Agios Petros Episkopos Argos, it became parishioner. The church is a 3-aislet cruciform inscribed with a dome. The right aisle is dedicated to Saint Charalambos and the left to Saint Paraskevi. It has a brightly decorated winged altarpiece with hagiographies of 1836 by the famous hagiographer Evstathios. The bell tower of the church was constructed in 1853 at the expense of municipality of Argos. During the strong earthquake at the end of probably 19th century, the temple became ramshackle and secured with iron works that were placed in 1912. For the years that the Church of Ayios Ioannis served as a metropolitan church, the official ceremonies and phrases for the Advent, including swearing in and coming of age of Kings Otto and Georgios I, were performed. On March 5th, 1937, the King of Greece, George II, praises with his decree the church as a historical preservable monument. During the German occupation, 1941 to 1944, soup was distributed to children, to women who were about to give birth, and the elderly. At the forecourt of St. John has been set up the manufacturing crews of soup kitchen with the capacity to distribute 2,000 portions per day. In toddlers, children up to 14 years old, the women who were about to give birth, and sick people were also given milk. On February 24th, 2011, after a short circuit caused in the oil boiler of the temple, the right wing of the women's loft completely burned. Many relics, icons, and vestments of the Holy Table. From the soot, the interior of the church was blackened, and hagiographies and the winged altar piece of the church were suffered with significant damages. With the help of pious Christians of Argos and institutions, the burned roof and part of the interior of the church was cleaned and repaired. In 2017, there was a complete restoration of the roof of the women's loft, and was completely cleaned the soot from the inside of the church. Since then, a study has been underway for the maintenance and restoration of the church as a whole. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Father, thank you so much for that, and it's absolutely amazing. It's absolutely amazing the history of that particular church. I didn't realize that it was also the center or the cathedral, let's say, of the area before the new church was built. One of the things that struck me while you were speaking had to do with its linkages to Agya Paraskevi. In the United States, there's only one Agya Paraskevi church, which is located in Long Island, and it just so happens that within the last week, I was asked to go there to speak to the youth, the Greek Orthodox youth of America, relating to the construction of St. Nicholas Greek Orthodox Church, a national shrine, which is being built in New York, and which I have been involved in the construction of. So that in its sense was very interesting to me, and we have to promote that church a lot more in the United States. And now that you mentioned what you mentioned, really the importance of this church is unbelievable. By the way, it's unbelievable as far as I'm concerned. And Nico, this is amazing. We have to certainly spread the word about this particular church in Argos. What I would like to do now is introduce Demetrios Kousoulas. He is a PhD student in classical archaeology at the University of Munster in Germany. He has worked as a librarian and adjunct professor at the American Center of Archaeology at Mycenae. And he is the author of numerous publications and papers, including Pandemos, Aphrodite of Skopas, the dissemination of the iconographical type from the statues to the coins and jewels, the coinage of Alea, the unbearded Hercules on the coins of the Sicilian cities of the late 5th century BC, and some thoughts on the origins of the iconographical type and its spreading in the sculpture. as well as on-the-road connections between Argos and Corinth in the antiquity. Welcome, Dimitri, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the introduction. I have checked the file in the Gmail. I don't know if you have got it. Otherwise, I can send it to the chat.
Yeah, Costa, I think I sent you an email with what he had. Did you get it?
Can you?
Costa?
Yes, I got a mail for James Jacob Williams for Maria. Maria sent me one.
Did you get something from Dimitri?
No, let me check
Can
again.
you check something that I sent you that may have Dimitri's?
Yeah, I got it.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah.
You want to bring it up?
Yeah, give me a second.
Okay. Everyone should know that what we're discussing today is historical in nature. It's something obviously that we started to talk about more recently, even though it was known in Argos. And this will only be part of the continuation. We expect obviously to do the ground penetration survey once approved, and certainly to promote everything that's around the church of Ayios Ioannis in Argos. Dimitri, go ahead, please.
Okay. Dear all, in my presentation, I will examine the issue of the burial of prominent Philhellenes in the courtyard of the Church of Timios Prodromos in Argos. For the title of my presentation, as you can see, I borrowed the phrase from Iliad, Gerastanoton, that means the honor or the respect to the deceased, as we should attribute. The next slide, please. Okay. The role of Philhellenism was an important factor of the independence war. Through the archival research, it is known that at least 940 foreign nationals from several countries came to Greece to support the Greek forces. The Argeians honored the Philhellenes who acted in Argos by allowing their burial in the courtyard of the Church of St. Prodromos, which was used exceptionally as a burial place for prominent people. The historical information about the church was already communicated by Father Antonis, so I just want to say that at this place, to repeat again, there was an early Christian church, probably devoted to Saint Paraskevi, and we can see part of this church at the basement of the walls of the modern church walls, and at this place, it is also said that the temple of Apollo Lykios in the antiquity was erected. So we may see that there is probably a continuity of the cult, of the use as a cult place of this area. So the next slide, you can see some photos of the church in the modern situation. Next slide, please. Here is the inscription, the honorary inscription to Ioannis Kapodesias, who financed the erection of our church by the Argeians, who honored them. Next slide, please. Again, here you can see the modern entrance, which is, I suppose, of the late 19th century, actually 60 years after the erection of the temple, because of this pediment that exists above the entrance. And to the right of the entrance is, of course, the bell tower, which we will see in the next photo. Here you can see a photo from 1946 of the Gunnar Street, where is our church. The bell tower is probably of Tinian work, because we know that many Tinian artists, craftsmen traveled throughout Greece and erected such monuments. It's an amazing construction, actually, and very impressive until nowadays. And you can see also it's very interesting to see the surrounding area and the people of that period, the Aegeans of that period. Next slide, please. Okay. As we read in the book of Ioannis the Guinness about Argos, the Bishop of Hellos, Antonis, and the Danish Philhellene Dr. Geddasen, who was wounded during the invasion of Kechayabe on April 24, 1821, were buried in the courtyard of the church. Moreover, here lie the Württemberger Philhellene Captain Charles von Lissing, the German Philhellene Boltmann, Philhellene George Sarvis, who was buried here by General Demetrios Sotiris with ecclesiastical and military honors. Also buried here are General Demetrios Sotiris and the deceased members of its historic house. In the next slide, we can see the burial monument that was erected for the family of Sotiris, for the Sotiris family. This is in the western part of the courtyard. And in the inscription, we can see the names of the family that are buried here. Through the bibliographical research, it is shown that at the church of St. Ioannis Prodromos, other prominent Philhellenes have been buried. Moreover, half of the Aegeans who were killed by the French in an incident in 1833 were buried without a funeral procession in a burial pit at the courtyard. The other victims of this incident were buried at the site of the ancient Agora, which is to the south of the city, and were excavated in the years 2003-2004 by the French Archaeological School and the local Ephorate of Antiquities. Captain von Lissing, next slide, please. Was an officer from Württemberg who took part in the attack against the fortress of Palamidi in Nafplio. According to the sources, the regular army and the Philhellenes resisted for 3 hours. A cannonball shattered both legs of Captain von Lissing on December 3rd to 4th, 1821. The captain's body was buried the day after his death in Argos. The newspaper Zürcher Zeitung referred excessively to his burial, with emphasis on the funeral procession and burial costumes. That is a valuable source because we don't have much information about the burial costumes of this period. Next slide, we see Dr. Wilhelm Boltmann. He was an important figure of Philhellenism in Argos, and he was a doctor. At the age of 22, he came to Greece, and in the city of Argos, he practiced his profession, undertaking the treatment of several patients daily. He died in January 1822 due to an epidemic fever. According to the sources, the funeral procession was watched by an elderly man who cried all the time, and after that attendees left, fell on the grave and started mourning. He was one of Boltmann's patients who had been saved by him from certain death, and this is impressive to see how strong was the connection of the Philhellenes to the Aegean people and to the whole Greeks. Next, George Sarvis and James Williams are two prominent figures of American Philhellenism who seem to have been buried in the Holy Church of St. Ioannis Prodromos. George Sarvis was born on 1st or 17th of July 1797 in present day of Hamburg. He was the first American, actually, who arrived in Greece on April 3rd, 1822. As soon as he arrived on the island of Hydra, he adopted the Celtic Greek outfit with the characteristic fustanella. At the same time, George Sarvis Hellenized his name into Yorgos Zervis. From the lowest rank of navy, he joins the ranks of the army and gradually rose to the rank of general within 3 years. Captain Zervis, next slide, as he was renowned, remained on the island of Hydra until 1824 as serving officer of the Navy along the Greek officer Manolis Tompazis. After Lord Byron's arrival in Greece, Jarvis left Hydra for the town of Messolongi and served at the side of Lord Byron until the death of the latter on April 18, 1824. Under the guidance of the Greek engineer Kokkinis, he also helped fortify both Missolonghi and the island of Etoliko. During the invasion of Ibrahim Pasha of Egypt in 1825, he undertook the expenses for the 45 soldiers sent to Methoni. Since the summer of 1825, he served the camp of Theodoros Kolokotronis and worked closely with him. In 1826, he participated in the operations carried out by Theodoros Kolokotronis against the Turkish Egyptians in Tripoli and Kinoria, where he was wounded in the leg. Then he transferred his military action to the camp of the great chief of Rumeli, Georgios Karaiskakis, until the death of the general. From the year 1827, the last period of Jarvis' activity began, not so much as a warrior, but acting as a philanthropist and a representative of the Philhellenes of America in the distribution of medicines, food, and clothing. Despite his fighting spirit, he was not fortunate enough to die with a gun in his hand, fighting for his ideals. He died due to a disease on 11th of August, 1828 in Argos. James William was an African-American slave. He led an adventurous life, starting as a slave in the US. After somehow managing to escape the sugarcane plantation he worked on, south of Baltimore, he made his way onto a ship that sailed to Europe. Admiral Stephen Decatur decided to put the young man to work on his ship as it crossed the Atlantic. After fighting as a US sailor against the Barbary Coast pirates who had long been harassing American ships, Williams later fought as a member of Lord Cochrane's Hellenic Navy fleet, participating in battles on Naupactos and other areas during the Greek War of Independence. His life was recreated in a recent novel by Kostas Ertimiotakis, and according to the information that we have by Nikolaos Kosomoulis and other authors, both George Jarvis and James Williams were buried in the courtyard of St. Ioannis Prodromos in Argos. The Bavarian Philhellenes Spittler may have been buried in the cemetery of Timios Prodromos. Unfortunately, not much is known about his action. According to the sources, he died in Argos in December 1821. In the sources of 1821, other representatives of Philhellenism are mentioned, who died in the glorious city of Argos. You can see a gravure of the late 19th century with Argos, the citadel of Larissa, which means the word Larissa means citadel in the early Greek dialects. And you can see a building on the slope of the hill, which is probably the modern monastery devoted to Panagia Portokalousa or Katakekrimeni. Among the deceased Philhellenists in Argos are the Italian Vasconi, who fell on the battlefield during Ibrahim's invasion of Argos on June 14, 1825, and the French student Justin, who was Faviero's chief of staff and retired after the dissolution of the 4th Infantry Battalion. Justin died of an illness on July 25, 1830. Unfortunately, the burial places of these men are not known, but it is possible that they were also buried in the courtyard of the church of Timios Prodromos in Argos. the next slide. The brief review of the biographies of the European and American Philhellenes who acted in the city of Argos demonstrates the significance of the church of St. Ioannis Prodromos in Argos as their burial place. However, the fragmentary nature of the bibliographic research makes it imperative to investigate and study archival sources, memoirs, documents, etc. The archival research, in combination with a possible excavation of the courtyard of the church, will enlighten many aspects of the action of the Philhellenes in Argos. Thank you for your attention.
Dimitris, thank you so much for the presentation, and it's absolutely amazing to me what actually exists historically within Argos. And for those who are listening, who are not in that area, when you're visiting Hellas, one of the stops that you must make is that holy ground in Argos, in particular the church that we're talking about right now. I'm absolutely amazed by the history of this particular city, and we'll discuss it further. I'd like to go back to Nico. Nico, if you can introduce our next two panelists.
Ναι, είμαι πάρα πολύ χαρούμενος που θα εισηγηθώ, που θα προλογίσω τον Νικόλαο Μπουπάρη, όχι μόνο γιατί είμαστε συνονόματοι, αλλά είχα πάντα μια εκτίμηση για τους δασκάλους και ιδιαίτερα για τους δασκάλους της περιφέρειας, καθώς επίσης και αργότερα η επόμενη καλυμμένη μας, και είναι πολύ σημαντικό να έχουμε μια γυναίκα επιστημόνισσα, τη Μαρία Stathoyianni. Both HAP and EMBCA support women scientists, and we're very pleased that you're here with us today, Maria. Nikolaos Boumparis is a Hellenic language and history teacher. Born in Piraeus, he studied history and archaeology in the University of Athens. Since 2013, he has been the president of the Argolis Association of Philologists, among the most active of its kind. Nikolaos has participated in organizing scientific conferences, has been co-editor of 2 scientific books, and has published book reviews. He has written articles in various Hellenic newspapers, and he's active and participates in conferences on Hellenic history and literature. This is about Nikos. And Maria Stathoyianni has been awarded an integrated master's in applied biology and technology from the University of Ioannina. She has obtained professional and educational experience at the University of Ioannina, Medicine School of Crete, Open University of Patras, Biomedical Research Foundation of the Academy of Hellenic Institute Pasteur in Athens, Foundation of Research and Technology in Crete, Hellenic Center of Ethics of the Church of Greece, European Learning Laboratory for the Life Sciences of EMBL. She teaches biology for nearly 15 years, applying in innovative educational tools, and in 2017 she won first prize at the International Students Competition, Cyprus, Greece, Homogenia, Educational Bridges, in collaboration with colleagues and students in various schools and newspapers. She is currently responsible for the Living Heritage Preservation Program on behalf of her school, the First Lycée of Argos, which is a member of the UNESCO Association Schools Network. Welcome, both of you.
Nikolaos, would like to start with you, perhaps, to make a presentation, and then Maria.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor, and I would like to express my gratitude to all of you for honoring me and the Argolis Association of Philologists through me to be among the panelists and before you today. So let's begin. The Greek War of Independence against the Ottoman Empire was not only of and for the people of Greece. This struggle also revived the spirit of Philhellenism throughout the world. Shelley's Manifesto of Philhellenes, Hellas, is well known, open quotes, "We are all Greeks. Our laws, our literature, our religion, our arts have their roots in Greece. But for Greece, we might still have been savages and idolaters. The human form and the human mind attained to perfection in Greece, which has impressed its image on those faultless productions whose very fragments are the despair of modern art, and has propagated impulses which cannot cease through 1,000 channels of manifest or inseparable operation to ennoble and delight mankind until the extinction of the race. The modern Greek is the descendant of those glorious beings whom the imagination almost refuses to figure to itself as belonging to our kind, and he inherits much of their sensibility, their rapidity of conception, their enthusiasm, and their courage." End of quote. The Greek Revolution aroused intense interest in Britain, France, the Netherlands, the German states, Switzerland, the Scandinavian countries, and of course the United States. In Austria, Russia, and Italy, the governments were even more authoritarian than elsewhere in Europe, and therefore evidence for public interest in Greece was harder to find. Yet it appears that in all countries where the classical tradition was strong, the news of the Greek Revolution was eagerly sought. Since Easter 1821, throughout the whole of Europe, men in many walks of life were touched with a passionate sympathy for the Greeks and a desire to help them. The long years of repetition by poets and travelers had spread the ideas of Philhellenism wide and deep, and it suddenly changed its character from being an intellectual, mainly literary concept to a practical program. A demand for sending practical help to the Greeks was soon developed, and since it was clear that the government was not prepared to do anything to help, the endeavor was left to private initiative. The most obvious way of helping was to raise money for the purchase of arms. Since the beginning, the call was also made for volunteers to fight in the Holy War. The proclamations of the Greeks themselves begged for help, and they were soon being repeated in pamphlets. In the United States, too, the Philhellenic movement made a strong start in 1821. An appeal was sent to the United States declaring, "We esteem you nearer than the nations on our frontiers." This appeal was widely circulated in the United States under the instigation of Edward Everett, a professor at Boston. Yet the role of American Philhellenism was to be of greater importance in another field. During the winter of 1826, a new danger had begun to threaten the fragile existence of Greece. For those that had eyes to see, Greece's worst enemy was not the Turks or the Arabs anymore, but starvation. The country was in the grip of famine. Hundreds of people had already died, and thousands more were quickly sinking into hopelessness. The fighting and devastation of 1826 exhausted Greece's last reserves of food and money. The Greeks were now wholly dependent on the charity of other nations to bridge the gap between starvation and survival. A steady stream of informative and interesting letters from Jervis, Miller, and Howe were widely published throughout the United States. Towards the end of 1826, they began to report on the poverty of the country. At the same time, letters from some of the Greek leaders arrived in America, including Theodoros Kolokotronis, asking for help. The three Philhellenes, George Jarvis, Jonathan Peckham Miller, and Samuel Gridley Howe, found themselves launching an appeal for help. America came to the rescue. All over the United States, new committees sprang up to arrange fundraising activities or to collect food and clothing. Tens of thousands of Greeks owed their survival through the terrible year 1827 to a few pounds of flour donated by the citizens of some small, far-off American town and brought to them by the three Americans who had fought in their war, learned their language, assumed their style of dress, and had taken the side of the poor against the great men of Greece. More than 300 Philhellenes laid down their lives on Greek soil. They are and will be with us forever. The first memorial site dedicated to the Philhellenes who fell in the struggle for the liberation of Greece from the Ottoman captivity was established in the city of Nafpli in the Catholic Church of Transfiguration. The monument was constructed in 1841 and its founder was the French officer and Philhellenes Auguste Hilarion Touré, who fought in various places on the Greek side, survived the war, and died in Athens in 1857. In his book on the Greek Revolution, we have already seen some part of it, Miller himself describes as two separate examples of unknown Philhellenes who showed unique courage. The first concerns George Wilson from Rhode Island, who was a gunman in the Greek fleet. Open quote. Such was the bravery he showed in the battle against the Turkish fleet in the Gulf of Naupactos that Lord Cochrane became drunk blind, drinking in his health. End of quote. The second example was that of James Williams. We have already talked about him. As far as Jarvis' death is concerned, I must refer to the information provided from the General Gazette. He was buried with the honors of a lieutenant general, with illness as the cause of death without further details. Some spoke of tetanus, others of fevers, hence so many Philhellenes have suffered during the struggle, and Lazos mentions typhus as the cause of Jarvis' death. Jarvis and Williams are believed to be buried in Argos, alongside other Philhellenes who fought and died during the 1881 revolution. Their memorial stones are in the church as a permanent reminder of the sacrifices they made for freedom. The theory that both Williams and Jarvis memorial stones can be found in the cemetery of the city of Argos is quite right. At present, it remains unknown whether their stones in Argos are over their actual tombs or the great Philhellene heroes have been interred elsewhere, but it's worth to try and find out. Greeks and the Greeks will forever express feelings of immense gratitude for all the emblematic noble gentlemen and women, and will always honor them for their heroic contribution to the struggle for the independence of Greece. And in Lord Byron's word, the mountains look on Marathon, and Marathon looks on the sea. And musing there an hour alone, I dreamed that Greece might still be free. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Nico, for that. And a few people have mentioned Miller, and we should note that Miller did, in fact, there were orphans, obviously, many orphans, as a result of the Hellenic Revolution, and one of the orphans was actually adopted by Miller, and his name, he took on his surname, Lucas Miller, and Lucas Miller became the first Hellenic American member of Congress in the United States of America, and I think it's very important to indicate that. In terms of the statements, I think that the literature indicates that Jarvis is absolutely buried in the grounds of Ayios Ioannis. With regards to James Williams, we don't know. We believe that that's the case. I should mention also that Americans knew of the Hellenes, obviously, before the Hellenic Revolution. As a matter of fact, in the Barbary Wars that America fought against the Barbary pirates, and in the first international engagement that the Americans had on foreign soil, in the first victory of the United States of America by the U.S. Marines, most of the soldiers who fought in the Battle of Darna, which was the first victory of the United States abroad, was in fact by Hellenes who fought for the Americans. That's important to note for the audience. With that, I'd like Maria, if you can, to make a presentation. Maria has been wonderful. I have to do my own small introduction of Maria. Maria has been wonderful in getting us all together and helping put together this particular panel discussion. Thank you, Maria, for all that you have done with regards to this particular circumstance, and certainly we owe, all of us owe a debt of gratitude to you and your work, and of course all those within Argos. Maria.
Thank you very much for everything. You honor me, Mr. Katsos. I don't know what to say. Prior to presenting a few slides, I would like to share some more information about myself and my engagement with the American Philhellenes. Maybe this sounds strange that I'm a biologist and I engage I'm engaged to Philhellenes, but I will tell you a small story. My ancestors on my father's side immigrated to Atlanta, Georgia in the 1890s. My grandfather's brother, Konstantinos Stathoyiannis, Charles Jones, was one of the initial members of Chapter 1 of AHEPA in Atlanta. Furthermore, my family celebrates the living heritage of my fifth-generation grandfather, who fought bravely during the Greek Revolution and was decorated for his achievements. In consequence, I was motivated to research several publications and the national records to locate any available data regarding his life. Can I have the presentation, please? Thank you. Meanwhile, the legend of James Williams moved and excited me, and it seems that I communicated my excitement to some of my students as well. Let me first begin by explaining why the story of James Williams is relevant to the goals of the United Nations and UNESCO. Next slide, please. At the 15th General Assembly of the United Nations on September 25, 2015, the Agenda for Sustainable Development and its related 17 Sustainable Development Goals were adopted. Goal 4, concerning quality education, aims to ensure that all learners acquire the knowledge and skills needed to promote sustainable development by 2030, including, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and non-violence, global citizenship, and appreciation of cultural diversity and of cultural contribution to sustainable development. The UN Secretary General called on all sectors of society to mobilize for a decade of action on 3 levels: global action, local action, and people action, including by youth, civil society, the media, the private sector, unions, academia, and other stakeholders to generate an unstoppable movement pushing for the required reforms. Our school, First Lycée of Argos, is a member of the UNESCO's Associated School Network since 2020 and endeavors to promote UNESCO's values. Next slide, please. Next slide, thank you. But it seems we have a long way to go in order to attain the goal of quality education. The previous slide, please. Thank you. Here is a frame from the gameplay of a very popular digital game. Let's take a closer look. The gamer is searching for something, but what is his goal? We need to motivate the students to apply, next slide please, their extraordinary abilities and channel their powerful energy into activities that develop their personality. For example, next slide please. Students could wonder to whom is this heroine, the obelisk that you can see at the background, in the grounds of their parish dedicated to, and why. However, searching for answers can be boring and tedious. I teach biology for 15 years. I see it every year. Whereas, next slide, we can use educational tools like board games or escape rooms to attract their interest and participation. Next slide, please. Accordingly, our interdisciplinary project, we have combined STEAM and history based on gamification, has indeed spurred 16-year-old students' collaboration. The theme of the project is the fascinating contribution of James Williams to the Greek Revolution. 4 teachers and 24 students have committed to this. We were successful in persuading students to read books and research official records. In the process of researching records, the students additionally developed curiosity concerning all the fighters from their hometown here in Argos, a goal we definitely wanted to accomplish. They also enhanced their soft skills and their capacity to learn by doing while crafting an innovative board game. Through this process, the students comprehended and endorsed the values of freedom, justice, and non-discriminations. We intend to disseminate our results to the second international student competition for board and digital games design. And this competition is under the auspices of General Secretariat for Greeks Abroad and Public Diplomacy, among others. We would appreciate taking part to the World Cultural Heritage Youth Symposium in 2022 in Olympia, but the cost is beyond our means, 430 euros per person. Next slide, please. Why did we select James Williams among all these Philhellenes who fought for the freedom of Greece for our project? Because he was young, brave, determined, loyal, ethical, daring, adaptable, resilient, mysterious. On top of that, young people like mysteries, as you know. On the left, there is a portrait, a fictional portrait of James Williams made by Spiridonas Zacharopoulos in 2021, and it's exhibited in the Museum of Philhellenes. Next slide, please. So what are the facts that we have gathered with my students, just a school project? James Williams was an Afro-American sailor from Baltimore, Maryland. He served with distinction in the US Navy during the USA-Algerian War of 1815. Admiral Educator suggested he fought for Greece, a country that had already abolished slavery. Arrived in Greece in January 1827 as the cook to Lord Cochrane aboard the brig Sotiris in Greek, Sotiris. Next slide, please. Bravely fought, regaining control of the helm of the brig Sotiris, and was severely injured by enemy fire during the sea battle of Lepanto. He was hospitalized in the American-sponsored hospital on Poros, and during the sea battle of Lepanto, he was deprived of all his belongings. In 1827, Miller offered him shelter in his house, and as we saw before, and he passed away in 1829. I found that in the literature. We have some disputed facts. Some sources refer to him as Yanni Willem. Actually, there is a source. Here's a book. Here's a book. It's written by Tomai Konstantopoulou, and it has been supported from the Hellenic Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Service of Diplomatic and Historical Archives. So here it says that Yanni Willem, American, he was compensated with the sum of 14 piastras or 10 paras for his services as a sailor in the struggle. So we have a clue here that he might be Yanni Willem, the same person. He also acted as a spy for Greeks, and this is a disputed fact too, but I have found it in one or two resources. Next slide, please. I am not a historian, so I can tell you about the oral tradition. So, besides the historical facts, we can also look at the oral tradition. Oral tradition to this day suggests that those heroes, and James Williams among them, are buried underneath this hero that you can see now. We saw that before. Next slide, please. And next slide. This is the Heron, which commemorates some heroic Philhellenes and distinguished revolutionary heroes and citizens of Argos. I have to say here that here in Ayios Ioannis, they were buried distinguished citizens of Argos. It wasn't actually a cemetery for all the people, but for the distinguished one. However, Next slide, please. Some locals claim that the graves of these men are closer to the road and behind the Heron, at the place that you can see on the right. There is also another rumor that some skulls, they have been transferred to the monastery that you can see on the hill. But this is just a rumor. In some books, we can find analytical description of the ceremony and burial of some heroes, like some German Philhellenes that are buried in the grounds of Ayios Ioannis. So the final slide, please. So James Jacob Williams is indisputably a hero. He succeeded in becoming a free man through a tough life and never surrendered his values. He can be a role model for the following generations, as all the aforementioned universal values are manifested in his person. Thank you very much.
Maria, thank you for that. I'm fascinated by some of the things that you mentioned. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, great. So I'm fascinated by some of the things that you mentioned. One of them is obviously your family member who was a member of AHEPA Chapter 1. So certainly if you can forward us some of that information, I'd be very fascinated to discuss this with some people. I think that's kind of important because as you know—
I have also some pictures.
Lou, I have to admit, Lou, I kept that from you. She told me when she saw
Okay,
me.
as the audience may not know or may know, this is also the 100th year of the anniversary of the founding of AHEPA, which in fact did take place in Atlanta, Georgia, in 1922. So I am interested in that. I'm also interested in, you mentioned the Greeks abroad, and who were you talking about? Were you talking about Yannis Chrysoulakis? So who are you mentioning in terms of working with? Maria, can you hear me?
Do you refer to the book?
No. I'm referring now. You mentioned something about you were getting some support from the Ministry of the Greeks abroad. So.
No, it's not support. We're going to participate in an international competition, but this competition is supported by the Secretariat.
Okay, so is Yannis Chrysoulakis involved in that, or no?
Probably
you don't
yes.
know. Huh?
Yes.
Okay, so this is something very important. I think that project that you have with the kids, with the game strategies and all the rest of that, I think is fascinating. And I love it. Quite frankly, that's the way you get young people engaged. And Eric is obviously involved with schools in Florida, like 10 schools, that I think some of their students may be interested in actually visiting Argos and being a part of this strategy, this game analysis, and all the rest of that. One thing I will say is that people's minds and people's minds with regards to James Williams have gone into all different types of places. I think although people are not historians, there are certain facts that we do know. But most of the things that are out there right now are things that in fact were created. And one thing in terms of history, I think what we have to do is find the appropriate research and find out exactly what took place with James Williams. I will say that Jarvis, you should add Jarvis to this game theory also, because with regards to American and Hellenic history, he's one of the most important people internationally in the line of, as we indicated before, Miller and Samuel Gridley Howe. And he is buried. We know in terms of written aspects that he is buried in somewhere in Ayios Ioannis. For the audience, it's very important for us to do a ground penetration survey to find out where people are buried. Because right now, I don't think we know exactly where people are actually buried. By doing the ground penetration survey, we're not saying that you'll know exactly who's buried there, because the survey will only tell you where people are buried. But I think after listening to everyone here, it's more than critical for us to do the ground penetration survey. Now, I know that it's going through the archaeology department or service within ELAS. Can someone speak to what are the issues of the archaeological people? Because the ground penetration survey is non-intrusive. We're not digging anything. We're just trying to find out where people are buried. Can someone explain what the issues are with the people in the archaeology group? Anyone? How about our archaeologist? Can he say what's... Yeah.
I think that actually we should suggest the survey to the Archaeological Service at Naplio, the effort of Naplio, and then we should take a permission for the study. Actually, they will discuss the matter at a certain committee of the Ministry of Culture, and if they allow, they will give a permission to do the research.
Okay, who will be speaking on our behalf? Because obviously we're in the United States and we're extremely interested in who is buried and where they are buried in the grounds of Ayios Ioannis. In other words, this is not only a Hellenic issue, but it's an international issue in our mind. I haven't gone out to speak to, for example, the Ministry of Greeks Abroad. I do know Yannis Chrysoulakis. Okay, I could speak to him. And I certainly know the new ambassador to Greece, who's George Tsounis, who I had also mentioned what we're trying to do. I'd like to know really, and we not necessarily in this discussion, but I'd like to know what the issues are and who is responsible and who we can talk to. And we're certainly going to make this a very large issue, at least as it relates to American and Hellenic linkages. Because you have two Americans that are buried, we believe, at least one of them we definitely know, but two Americans who are buried in Hellas. And this is something that's international. It's not only, in terms of Hellas. Again, we're talking about a non-intrusive methodology of ground penetration survey. Now, when I heard there's some issues with the archaeological service, I thought in my mind, since Argos is so ancient, that they're afraid maybe that there's some ancient ruins below, in the grounds or underneath the church or what have you, of where all these areas are surrounded. But anything that is found by this ground penetration survey will obviously be shared with the archaeological service. Who will represent us? Because we're obviously in the United States. Who will represent us with regards to that meeting that you're talking about with the service? We do not want to reach out to the American embassy and have America represent us there, because I don't think it's appropriate unless we're forced to do it. Dimitris, do you have any thoughts on this?
I'm not quite sure. Actually, what the effort wants is a complete suggestion of what we are going to do. And then we will send a letter to the effort and she will answer to us.
Okay, I don't know who could do that. I don't know who could do that, but the complete scenario is one sentence. We are there to do a ground penetration survey to find out where people are buried, period. That's all we want to find out, where they're buried.
It is a rumor that whatever is related to the archaeological committees takes some time. I don't know if it is true or not, but expect a long term.
No, listen, Nico, we don't have a long term. I don't want to make this a Hellenic American issue, but I will if I have to. I don't want to do that. Okay. We only are interested in where people are buried, nothing else. We're not going to dig up anybody's body right now. All we're interested in is where are people buried? Because right now we don't know where they're buried. We'd like to make a map of where people are buried.
One of the most powerful things you can unleash is people-to-people ties between American citizens and citizens of democracies. This has been shown time and time again. Even forward World War II, the Greek genocide, the largest participation, American citizens rivaled any government, actually superseded it. Here we don't have an aggregate place to give honor where it's due to the Greek people and the Americans across the land who gave to the cause and those who gave their lives at the same time. Just south of the mother of democracy in Athens. So literally we have an opportunity to do something, in my view, that is long overdue. That is I won't say a presence, because really it's a reverent thing, a merging of peoples, not of governments. That is the most important thing with what's happening in Europe right now. You have people, democracies banding together. We have a link that goes back to the founding of the nation.
I got it, but what I'd like, if possible, and the people of Argos, please, and Father, please give us some direction. But give us some direction, because if we have to discuss it with the Ministry of Culture or the archaeological people, if we know who they are, we'll certainly try to contact them, and if not, we'll have the American Embassy try to contact them to expedite what we're talking about, and including, I think, the military. Okay, including the military, because these were people who fought for Hellas. They're of interest, obviously, to Americans, and I think they're interest also to the Defense Ministry of Hellas itself. The Father.
So may I speak in Greek, please?
Please do, please.
Thank you. Ευχαριστώ. Εμείς ως Εκκλησία, ως Ναός, πήραμε την άδεια από τη Μητρόπολη. Ο Μητροπολίτης γνωρίζει το θέμα μας. Έχει δώσει την αδειά του, εφόσον όμως η αρχαιολογία μας δώσει την έγκριση. Δυστυχώς δεν μπορούμε να κάνουμε τίποτα, ούτε μια πέτρα να αλλάξουμε, δυστυχώς, εάν δεν το γνωρίζει η αρχαιολογία. Η αρχαιολογική υπηρεσία τώρα έχει ενημερωθεί με έγγραφο δικό μας, σας έχουμε στείλει και τα απαραίτητα έγγραφα και σε εσάς, αλλά δυστυχώς, όπως είπε ο κύριος Αλεξίου, θέλουν χρόνο οι διαδικασίες αυτές, δεν εξαρτάται από εμάς. Φανταστείτε ότι για να μας στείλει απάντηση η αρχαιολογία, μια έγγραφη απάντηση μιας σελίδας έκανε ένα μήνα. Λοιπόν, το οποίο είναι αδιανόητο. Οπότε θέλει λίγο υπομονή και επιμονή. Ζητούν από την αρχαιολογική υπηρεσία ένα project, ένα φάκελο καλό. Ποιος θα κάνει την έρευνα, ποιος θα χρηματοδοτήσει, ποιος θα είναι επιβλέπων, ποιους μηχανικούς θα έχει, όλα αυτά τα αναφέρει στο σχετικό έγγραφο. Εμείς έχουμε όλη τη διάθεση να βοηθήσουμε και το θέλουμε πραγματικά, το Εκκλησιαστικό Συμβούλιο και όλοι οι συνεργάτες, έτσι. Αυτό να το δούμε και μεταξύ μας, έτσι, ώστε καλύτερα να το συζητήσουμε.
Okay, yeah, no, I got it. Nico, here's our discussion. What we had indicated is the ground penetration survey. We will pay for it directly. Okay, to the company. We have the company obviously assembled to do it. Our only interest right now is just to do a ground penetration survey, nothing else. All we're interested in is finding out where people are buried, because we don't exactly know. And all we want is to create a map of where people are buried, nothing else. So, and this is no expense to anybody, quite frankly, except ourselves, because we're very interested in this. Nico, can you let me ask you a question, Nico. I understand that Greece goes slowly in certain things, archaeological people, et cetera, but I also understand if you have the mesa, if you know who to talk to, all of a sudden things happen very quickly. So we have to find out who those people are, Nico. Can you discuss this with us? Because I regard these agencies, et cetera, as people who may take 100 years. I'm going to be dead in 100 years. And my interest is to find out where people are buried and to do a map. So, Nico, would you like to speak on that and just find out what buttons do we have to push to expedite this, if you know?
Σίγουρα. Καταρχάς, πέρα από την αρχαιολογική είναι το Υπουργείο Πολιτισμού. Το Υπουργείο Πολιτισμού έχει μια πάρα πολύ κεντρική θέση σε αυτό. Εγώ επίσης θα πρότεινα η πρόταση να γίνει και συνεργασία με πανεπιστήμια. Μια σύνδεση πανεπιστημίων της Αμερικής με κάποιο πανεπιστήμιο της Ελλάδος. Γιατί αυτό θα βοηθήσει στην επίσπευση της επικοινωνίας μεταξύ των αρμοδιοτήτων, των αρμόδιων αρχών και εμάς. Οπότε νομίζω ότι πρέπει να κάνουμε μερικά βήματα προεργασίας πρώτα πριν φτάσουμε σε αυτό το σημείο.
So Nico, you're saying that we should do some institutional, academic institutions, etc. But what we're talking about here is not research. All we're talking about is a ground penetration survey, nothing else. Okay. Now you're saying that we have to get institutions themselves who are bureaucratic to get involved. Okay. So the more bureaucracy we have, the more ludicrous it becomes in my particular mind. I mean, I could be wrong. Certainly we can involve, we could talk to Catherine Fleming, who's the provost of NYU, and get her support, obviously. Certainly we can talk to you and the Queen's College to be involved. I think with Catherine and you and other people, we can get Hellenic institutions involved within Greece. But here we're talking about a ground penetration survey that has nothing to do with academia in my mind. But then again, I may be wrong.
Αλλά όπως είπε και ο αγαπητός Πάτερ Αντώνιος, και μια πέτρα να την πάσα 1 μέτρο δίπλα.
Αν ήταν να σηκώσουμε μια πέτρα, καταλαβαίνω, αλλά δυστυχώς δεν σηκώνουμε πέτρες. Μόνο θα κάνουμε ένα ground penetration survey που δεν θα σηκώσει τίποτα.
Θέλει μια γερή προετοιμασία με πιο οργανωμένο.
Anyone else have some comments? Because I think that we're going to obviously have another session to discuss this going forward. Because I need your help. I need your help to find out what we have to do and what buttons to push. Certainly, we can discuss it with the American embassy. And as I said, George Tsounis is going to be the new ambassador to Greece from the United States. I do know George Tsounis. And I think we can, in fact, I do know Kousoulas, who is involved with the diaspora abroad. I certainly can talk to those ministries, but I'm going to need your help in Hellas to help guide us, because εμείς είμαστε, τι είμαστε, Αμερικανάκια, δεν ξέρουμε τι γίνεται στην Ελλάδα με αυτά τα θέματα. Θέλουμε βοήθεια.
Κύριε Κάτω, ξέρετε, σωστά είναι όλα αυτά που λέμε. Ο κύριος Διδασκάλη είναι ο Γενικός Γραμματέας του Υπουργείου Πολιτισμού, είναι από την περιοχή μας, είναι από την Αργολίδα, από το Λιγουριό νομίζω. Από το Λιγουριό είναι. Λοιπόν, και το έχουμε υπόψη να χτυπήσουμε την πόρτα αυτή. Απλώς η αρχαιολογία, επειδή παίρνει τις γραμμές της από το Υπουργείο Πολιτισμού, και το Υπουργείο Πολιτισμού είναι αυτό που λέει ότι θα δουλέψουν έτσι. Οποιαδήποτε, αυτό είναι έρευνα που θέλετε να κάνετε, που θέλουμε να κάνουμε, είναι μια έρευνα. Και δεν τους νοιάζει αν θα σηκώσουμε πέτρα ή όχι. Σου λέει, θα βάλετε μηχανήματα να ψάξετε, θα το κάνετε σωστά. Δυστυχώς ή ευτυχώς, τι να πω.
Okay, you're going to have to tell us, if you can, you're going to have to tell us, in other words, who they report to. If you can, we'd like to know. It's always good to start with the people that you know and go through the process that you're discussing, and to give them the opportunity to help us. But what I'm saying, and I'm not sure when you're going to be meeting with them, but once that happens, we should communicate with each other and find out what's the next step that we can take. Obviously, we can take certain steps abroad that you cannot take locally. We do not want to do those steps, but we will take those steps if we have to. We will take those steps if we have to. We don't want to make this an international American/Hellenic controversy where we can't even go find out where our Americans are buried. But this could be a big deal, quite frankly. Any other comments?
Συγγνώμη, ένα τελευταίο. Σας είπα πριν ότι από το 2016 ξεκίνησε η μελέτη, απλή μελέτη αποκατάστασης του ναού και αναστήλωση του μνημείου. Και ακόμα έχουμε φτάσει το 2022 και δεν έχει τελειώσει η μελέτη. Δυστυχώς.
Well, listen, this has been a fascinating discussion. Nico, if you'd like to say some last words, and then anyone who wants to give some last words, and then we'll call it a day. We're obviously going to get together in the near future to have a further discussion as we develop more information. Nico.
Εγώ θέλω να ευχαριστήσω όλους όσους συνέβαλαν στη σημερινή εκδήλωση. Ήταν, νομίζω, όπως είπες και εσύ, Λου, πριν, ιστορική, γιατί μπαίνει μια βάση όχι μόνο επικοινωνίας και συνεργασίας, αλλά είχαμε την ευκαιρία να ανταλλάξουμε και κάποιες ιδέες, να βρεθούν νεότερα στοιχεία και να συνδέσουμε διάφορες μεταβλητές που έτσι είχαμε στο νου μας. Θέλω να ευχαριστήσω από τα βάθη της καρδιάς μου για την συμμετοχή όλων σας και για την πάρα πολύ καλή και άρτια προσφορά σας. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Anyone else to make some final comments? Anyone is fine. Please just unmute yourself. Yeah, please. Please, Maria.
Μπορώ να μιλήσω στα ελληνικά?
Ό,τι θέλεις.
Θα μιλήσω και εγώ λίγο στα ελληνικά.
Γιατί όχι.
Θα ήθελα να πω ότι ενδεχομένως να μπορούμε να βρούμε κάποιες πληροφορίες και μέσω Κρήτης. Σας φαίνεται παράξενο, αλλά εγώ συνδέομαι πολύ στενά, γιατί έχω παντρευτεί κριτικό, τον έχω και δίπλα μου. Αλλά επειδή εκείνα τα χρόνια μετακινούνταν συνέχεια και αν διαβάσουμε λίγο τη βιβλιογραφία, θα δούμε ότι συμμετείχαν και σε αρκετές μάχες στη Κρήτη και μάλιστα και ο Μίλλερ και ο Τζάρβις είχαν βρεθεί στη Κρήτη για την απελευθέρωση του ακροτηρίου της Γραμβούσας. Και για να είμαι ειλικρινής, ύστερα και από κάποιο μικρό research που έκανα για την οικογένειά μου, βρήκα και εγώ εκεί μια διασύνδεση με την Κρήτη. Και στην Κρήτη έχουν πολύ μεγάλο οθωμανικό και ενετικό αρχείο. Υπάρχει περίπτωση να βρούμε κάποιες πληροφορίες εκεί. Η γνώμη μου είναι ότι ένα συνέδριο και με άλλους Philhellenes, μάλλον και με άλλες χώρες που σχετίζονται με Philhellenes, όπως είναι οι Γερμανοί, οι Γάλλοι, οι Ιταλοί, μπορεί να έχουν στα αρχεία τους πληροφορίες. Εμείς εδώ, ας πούμε, στον Άγιο Ιωάννη, έχουμε θαμμένους, όπως είδαμε και από την εξαιρετική παρουσίαση του Δημήτρη, πάρα πολλούς Γερμανούς. Είχαμε και το γεγονός με τους Γάλλους, που μπορεί να έχουμε και εκεί κάποια αρχεία. Οπότε νομίζω ότι αυτό θα μπορούσε να βοηθήσει να βρούμε κάποιες λεπτομέρειες. Επίσης, φέτος, εξαιτίας των 200 ετών, έγινε μια μερική αρχαιοποίηση των γενικών αρχείων του κράτους και είναι πιο εύκολο να βρούμε στοιχεία.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I'm very interested, by the way, in the German connection, because I listened to what Dimitri was saying, and I just listened to what you were saying, and certainly we want to link up also with the Germans, because they themselves obviously would be very interested in where potentially people are buried, including some of their perhaps citizens within the area. The Crete linkage, are you going to further analyze that, the linkage with Crete and their archives?
We have to say that all these kleftes, they were a team. Yes. And sometimes they moved all over the country. I found some records for my grand-grandfather in Etolokarnania. It was the first record I found about him. The other problem that we have is that they used nicknames.
Of course.
Nicknames.
Paratsuklia,
yeah. And this is very difficult because we might find some information about someone, but with a different name.
Of course.
The Cretans played a very significant, substantial role during the revolution.
Of course.
And they have kept all the records because they were still under Ottoman occupation until 1912.
No, I'm fully aware of that. My question was, are you going to follow through with those Cretan records and at least steer us in the direction of where we can link up with people who have those records so we can have that discussion? Μπορείς να βοηθήσεις σε αυτό το θέμα. να μάθουμε ποιοι είναι στη Κρήτη που μπορούν να μας βοηθήσουν σε αυτό το θέμα. Okay? Anyone else? Some final comments? Anyone else?
Να πω κάτι.
Please. Ναι, please.
Καταρχήν να ευχαριστήσω όλους και χάρηκα ιδιαίτερα για τις τοποθετήσεις και τις έρευνες που έχουν κάνει οι εξαιρετικοί συνομιλητές. Επειδή ήμουν χρόνια στην τοπική αυτοδιοίκηση και με την αρχαιολογία είχαμε πάντοτε θέματα καθυστερήσεων, παρότι το τελικό αποτέλεσμα βέβαια ήταν άψογο, οι καθυστερήσεις ήταν ιδιαίτερα μεγάλες. Ένας τρόπος που θα μπορούσε η αρχαιολογία να δει σοβαρά με την έννοια της ταχύτητας όλο αυτό το θέμα που θέλετε να κάνουμε αυτή την έρευνα για το που είναι ενταφιασμένοι οι Philhellenes, είναι αυτό που είπε ο κύριος Αλεξίου, μέσα με συνεργασίες πανεπιστημίων. Όταν υπάρχουν συνεργασίες πανεπιστημίων ή αρχαιολογικών σχολών, υπάρχει εδώ στην Ελλάδα η Αμερικανική Αρχαιολογική Σχολή, η οποία έχει σε πολλές περιοχές κάνει έρευνες, οι οποίες έρευνες είναι συναφείς και παράλληλες με τις έρευνες της Ελληνικής Αρχαιολογικής Εταιρείας. Έχει μία βαρύτητα δηλαδή η συμμετοχή της Αμερικανικής Αρχαιολογικής Εταιρείας, όπως και κάποιου πανεπιστημίου, ειδικά πανεπιστημίων που ασχολούνται με την έρευνα, σε συνεργασία με κάποιο πανεπιστήμιο δικό μας. Πλέον δεν θα έχει να κάνει με έναν φιλολογικό σύλλογο ή ένα σύλλογο ομογενείας, ο οποίος θέλει να κάνει μία έρευνα, να ταυτίσει κάποιες γνώσεις που έχει με την πραγματικότητα, αλλά μία ιστορική και επιστημονική προσπάθεια, την οποία η αρχαιολογία και το Υπουργείο Πολιτισμού θα συμφωνήσω με τον πατέρα Αντώνιο για την συγκυρία της ύπαρξης του κυρίου διδασκάλου, που είναι Γενικός Γραμματέας του Υπουργείου Πολιτισμού, ο οποίος θα το δει σίγουρα θετικά το θέμα, γιατί είναι πολύ γρήγορος στις αποφάσεις του που αφορούν ειδικά την περιοχή μας. Και για να το συνοψίσω, πανεπιστήμια και συνεργασίες δύο πανεπιστημίων και Αμερικανικής Αρχαιολογικής Σχολής, νομίζω ότι είναι μια φόρμουλα που θα μπορούσε να επηρεάσει θετικά και γρήγορα την δική μας την αρχαιολογική υπηρεσία και το αρμόδιο τμήμα της που θα δώσει την άδεια για να γίνουν αυτές οι έρευνες. Θέλω να ευχαριστήσω όλους σας, εσάς κύριε Κάτσο, όλους τους υπόλοιπους, τους συναδέλφους από εδώ, από την Ελλάδα, από την Αμερική. Χαίρομαι ιδιαίτερα, σας ξαναλέω ότι ο Δαναός και ο Δήμος είναι πάντοτε ανοιχτοί σε συνεργασίες για την ανάδειξη ιστορικών τόπων, ιστορικών ενεργειών που έχουν να κάνουν με την διαφήμιση του τόπου και την εδραίωση αυτής της παλιάς του σλόγγαν ότι το Άργος είναι η αρχαιότερη ευρωπαϊκή πόλη, αν όχι και μία από τις αρχαιότερες παγκόσμια πόλεις. Να ξέρετε ότι το Άργος είναι μέλος του δικτύου των αρχαιότερων ελληνικών πόλεων της Ευρώπης, στο οποίο συμμετέχουν μεγάλες πόλεις όπως είναι το Μάστριχτ, όπως είναι το Κόλτσεστερ στην Αγγλία, το Κόρκ στην Ιρλανδία κλπ. Είναι μια πόλη η οποία προσπαθεί μέσα από την πολύ παλιά της ιστορία να έχει μια και σημερινή παρουσία, και μία από τις ενέργειες που θα την εδραιώσει και θα την κάνει ακόμα πιο σημαντική θα είναι και η κατάληξη αυτής της προσπάθειας που κάνετε, ούτως ώστε το Άργος να δείξουμε ότι δεν έχει μόνο αρχαιότητες, έχει και νεότερες παρακαταθήκες ιστορίας. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ όλους.
Thank you so much, Nico. The suggestions are good. We'll link up with institutions both in the United States and Hellas. Yeah. Even though people are pushing it towards the archaeological, a ground penetration survey is not the archaeological. All it is a map of where people are buried. But that's okay. That's okay. We can use that for the archaeologists who may want to do something archaeological later. But what we're talking about is a ground penetration survey. I like this, by the way. I like the idea of getting the institutions involved, not that they're going to do anything, but just to excite them also. In other words, we can excite the American institutions and we can excite the Hellenic institutions, and everybody can get excited, because what we're doing right now is fascinating. What we're doing right now in discussing what's in Argos in this particular location is absolutely amazing. And I think it's going to do a lot, in my opinion, for the city of Argos itself, as being a place, not only as was said just now, on ancient things, but also on more modern things, and the importance of Argos in terms of the founding of the Hellenic nation in the 1820s and in the revolution. I'd like to thank everyone who spoke today. It was a fascinating discussion. And I'd like all of you, the audience, to join us for our next event, which is on April the 10th, which we're going to do on the life and times and works of Dan Georgakis. In May, we're going to do a different type of topic. This one will be more related to business, and it will be a discussion on the metaverse in the 21st century. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you to all the panelists. You were absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Argos. We love you. Thank you to the Metropolitan. Thank you to the Mayor of Argos. Thank you to all the people of Argos. Thank you, Maria. Thank you all. And we will talk to each other again, because this is a first of a series with this discussion, which in my opinion is an extremely important one in the history, not only of Hellas, but in the history of the United States of America. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, yes.
Good evening in Greece and good afternoon in America. Thank you.
Thank you.
Γεια σας.
Καληνύχτα, καληνύχτα. Good night.
Καληνύχτα, καληνύχτα.